everyone. A very warm welcome to this first parallel session of the day on the Life Clean Energy Transition work, which concentrates on cities and regions and energy poverty. So a very warm welcome to our participants, and of course a very warm welcome to my colleague speakers. Just for a quick first housekeeping, if you allow me, I would just like to clarify with all of the participants who've joined that you are actually in the session that you intended to be, because we have 3 parallel sessions ongoing at the same time. So here we are looking at local energy transition plans and energy poverty. In case you have the feeling that that is not quite what you were looking for, then I would invite you to elegantly leave. You can go back to the B2Match platform and basically register to the session of your choice. Now, this being said, I would, of course, welcome to all of you who stay with us. Let me introduce myself. My name is Annette Jan. I'm head of sector within the Clean Energy Transition team of the CINEA, and I will have the honor of chairing the session. So maybe we could move. For the moment, I invite you to put in the back of your mind the coordinates for our Slido session. That's the instrument that we will use in order to capture your questions later on in the question and answer session. But in the meantime, I would invite that we would take the first slide of this presentation, and we'll move to the second one, because then we will see the agenda of the day. So probably many of you have joined us for the plenary session of this morning, which gave a fairly rich, fast overview of the policy background and the Life CET program as such. And now we'll have the opportunity to zoom in, of course, with more time and more detail into our funding topics. This session, as I said, will focus on 2 funding topics, which have in common that they aim to support really the important role of the cities and municipalities in the clean, but also in the just energy transition. So these are really 2 absolutely centric and long-standing areas of the work under the Life Clean Energy Transition Program. So let me share the agenda that we prepared for you for this session. So we will have a policy overview and an update on the European policy context. Those who joined us this morning, you'll have learned that the program is fairly aligned to underpin our policy priorities. And therefore, we have the pleasure of having Elena Donari with us, policy officer from DG Energy. She's joining us from the unit on working on consumers, local initiatives, and the just transition. Then we'll move to present our 2 funding topics of this session. The first, technical support to clean energy transition plans and strategies in municipalities and regions, with a short name local. And this will be presented by my colleagues Dimitris Sofianopoulos and Christina Mestre. We'll follow then with our topic on alleviating household energy poverty and vulnerability in Europe, called ENERPOV, and that will be presented by our colleague Nina Klemola. We'll have also the benefit, and so we will be delighted to have Marika with us, to hearing really the hands-on and very long-term experience of a project coordinator working in the field of action. So we have Marika Rosa, who's senior project manager at Economa from Latvia, who's joined us kindly this morning to give us really her direct experience from herself, but probably also from all her partners across other borders, which are involved in her projects. And then we'll have time for question and answers, to which I would invite again, for those of you who have not used Slido before, that you will go to slido.com and enter the event code, which was streamed earlier, hashtag EULive23, and where you can go to this room, which is called local. And from there onwards, you can start posting your questions, which we will address in the question and answer session. So on this small housekeeping advice, how we will manage the question, again, a warm welcome. And without further ado, I'd like that we move to our presentations. And herewith, I would like Elena to start and invite to give us an overview of the most recent policy developments, which is really underpinning the work that we are trying to support, but certainly also the work that our participants are actually very busy in implementing. Thank you, Elena. The floor is yours.
Thank you, senior colleagues, and thank you all for your interest in this session. In the next 15 minutes, I'll offer you a policy update that is tailored for the two themes that will be addressed in this session. So I'll start with the first slide, and on the first two slides, we will go very quickly because this is the political context. I hope you had the chance to attend the previous session where you have certainly received a general policy update on the let's say and climate objectives and initiatives currently on. So for us, it's important that we keep in the background two strategies mainly. One is the obviously the European Green Deal strategies with actions and deliverable. This is our strategy. This is set in the EU on our path to reach our climate targets by 2030 in a fair, cost-effective and competitive way. It's our blueprint for this transformational change which is required. And here you have a summary of all the major, let's say, initiatives that have been that follow from there. And in particular, here in this session, we will focus on those who are under the Fit for 55 package and how we have worked to streamline certain priorities relating to addressing conditions of the most vulnerable in our society and the role of the local level. And in the next slide, we just want to recall our response to the crisis. So obviously in the last year and a half, we had to take into account the different circumstances, which started with the high energy prices context and then a war situation which is still ongoing. And this has been the EU coordinated response to the crisis through the Repower EU strategy with a plan with this the three main pillars, which are been diversifying our energy sources and accelerating the clean energy transition, increasing targets, in particular in the uptake of the renewable energy, and also then reducing demand. This was also required to meet our objective of ending our dependency and also successfully coordinating through the crisis and so increasing the targets on energy savings in that respect. Now we will deep dive a bit more on these two themes, on the alleviation of energy poverty. So I'll take them in reverse compared to the session will follow, and then the role of local authorities. So we can continue with the next slide. So I just want to recall here that, and I think this is important to take into account to see, the long way we've been through, that energy poverty as an issue, a problem to be addressed, has been actually included in the electricity directive. Here you have the latest one, the existing one, for which then we will perhaps discuss current improvements in the context of the reform you have maybe heard about that was presented in March of the electricity market. But even the previous, let's say the previous, let's say, legislative initiative for the electricity market was already including the problem of addressing energy poverty, and this is usually a requirement to member states to take appropriate measures. Then we had also, in the context of the reporting of those actions that have been taken into account by the member states in terms of addressing energy poverty and also addressing energy poverty. Also try to understand the problem they have in the country and set a strategy, a path for achieving certain results. This is covered through the regulation on the governance of the energy union. So that there is a requirement for the member states. They identify this as a problem to include it in their national energy climate plans, which are the major strategic document of each EU country, where we set all our energy and climate objectives and also strategies in order to achieve those. In that respect, we have started this year to receive the first reporting of these, let's say, areas of work, and in fact this year the Commission, and particularly GENER, will be busy in assessing what the member states are reporting to us under this obligation, and also at the same time there is a requirement for them to update their plans in view of changes that happen in between. And this is and so we are expect also to receive revised national energy climate plans before December in order to assessment. I think we'll go very quickly on the next slide. Here you can see what we are suggesting the member states to address under the governance regulation and definition of energy poverty. This is also, as I said before, it's also let's say indicated in the electricity directive and will be mirrored in the gas package under negotiations. It means that in order to take certain measures to address the problem, also in the not in the let's say in the energy sector, but not exclusively, because in our energy sectoral documents we recognize also the importance of other sectors, other players, including social policy, to help resolving this problem, which is a multidimensional problem in our perspective. So this is what is required to the member states to report on, and we have provided a short guidance on how to do so. Then on the next slide, I think this is here we start with perhaps the first interesting policy update coming from this year, in particular for you. So in the context of the Fit for 55 package, we had also the recast of the energy efficiency directive, and in that context the Commission has proposed to have a new level definition of energy poverty. Why so? First of all, we heard calls from the Parliament, European Parliament, also from those who are active on the ground, that there have been difficulties in having a common understanding of what we are talking about when we refer to energy poverty. And the reason this has been done in the Energy Efficiency Directive is because traditionally energy efficiency has been, and then energy savings have been considered as the most, if not the most, but certainly one of the most effective tools to address this problem. And so we wanted to offer a stable framework where to put this definition, which also allow any member state to have their own definition, but also and even being more ambitious. That's what we try to explain through the definitions that you see on the screen. I would just mention the three main drivers that have been clarified to explain this problem that, as I said, we consider multidimensional, and perhaps and we see that there is a lot of agreement in that respect, not only from the community of experts in Europe and internationally, but also, unfortunately, due to a new awareness through the crisis, also by member states that traditionally only refer to energy poverty as a condition deriving from low levels of income. While in our perspective, and this is the result of the compromise that was reached at the start of this year with the co-legislators, so this will be in the text of the Energy Efficiency Directive. We should also include also the expenditure on energy as an important component, and most importantly, also the condition of the building, so the fact that there is low energy efficiency and poor building efficiency standards. So this is also an important policy, let's say, new development that from now on has to be taken into account, because the intention is from the Commission, but also from the co-legislator, to ensure also stability and clarity to include and this definition in all relevant documents and initiatives. And this has been already done, for instance, in the context of the Social Climate Fund negotiation. So this is a regulation that has been provisionally approved at the end of last year and finally endorsed in spring this year, and which is particularly targeting vulnerable households, including energy poor. And there we have already this definition cross-reference. I'll go very quickly on the next slide. So here you have a bit of an overview of what of the political agreement that was reached in March. So I will just recap what is relevant for you to be aware, what has been agreed under the Energy Efficiency Directive. So as we just saw, the first ever EU definition of energy poverty. So we can't say anymore that we don't have an agreed definition of energy poverty at the EU level. But this, as I said, doesn't exclude having more ambitious, improved version of that, being sure that all the three drivers that I just explained are taken into account. Then it's also important the obligation that we have in terms of energy savings, which are particularly targeting the vulnerable groups. And so there is a requirement to achieve a share of total amount of energy savings among vulnerable groups. For your information, this opens up to some questions and explains why it's so complex also to address these problems, because as we said, in some countries, a definition of energy poverty was lacking or still lacking. So the problem is not defined. And here there is a requirement to even achieve a share of total amount of energy savings among groups which are not perhaps defined in a certain country. So maybe this is a problem that you could help to address. And also there are sometimes unintended consequences from certain situations. I would just mention that there are certain dilemmas which are very peculiar of these particular groups of our population, because you can imagine that it could happen that by introducing an energy efficiency improvement, someone who is in a condition of that we could define as energy poor could actually increase its consumption to reach a better comfort level. And that has to be addressed vis-a-vis, let's say, the energy savings share that we would like to achieve. So there are a bit of contradictions that have also to be addressed in that respect. And then we have also articles that would encourage even a higher protection and empowerment of vulnerable customers. I think this is also a common theme that we have across the Fit for 55 package, the importance of mitigating the distributional effects of policies and measures, including through encouraging and enabling investments and the best use of public funding. I'll skip the next slide and then I will go straight to, I would say, the slide 14, just so the one on the energy. Yes, here just for you to be aware that we have published in 2020 a recommendation on energy poverty, and there you will find most of the issues that I'm just able to mention very briefly today, and including work that we have done with experts in Europe, leading experts in Europe, and some of them actually now they are managing national energy poverty observatories, and there we go into detail, and we also address the issues of finding the right indicators, how to analyze this problem, and we give also in an accompanying staff working document the list of indicators that we suggest in particular to public administration, but also at any level of governance to take into account to have a diagnosis of this problem and try to address it, defining, measuring, and taking action. And I think we can skip the next slide and also the other one. Here, I mean, you see, I would just give you an idea on, let's say, data that we have. Of course, although we don't have yet solid data on how the crisis had increased the situation of energy poverty across the EU, I would say by anecdotal evidence, we can certainly agree that situation has not improved, and also that it's very likely that those who have never experienced this situation before, so not the lowest income, let's say, share of our EU population or EU citizens, but perhaps the lower or the low income, or even in some cases a middle class, because of the high energy crisis, and then the energy crisis due to the war, have been a follow into this category. So that has also to be taken into account. I would just go to slide 20 very quickly. I think this is another, so the Social Common Fund. So this is another piece of, let's say, legislation which was included in the Fit for 55 package that is important for you to be aware of. The text of the regulation establishing a new Social Common Fund has been published in the official journal, and it's translated in all EU languages. So I will invite you to have a look. What is important for you to know is this is basically, we can say it's the first funding instrument at EU level, which is really dedicated to vulnerable households in energy and transport, and also in part to micro enterprises under certain conditions. And the main objective is to address negative distributional impacts. In the purpose of this fund are coming from introducing a carbon pricing extended to energy and the buildings and transport sector. This is a fund that member states can get access by presenting their national energy, the national social climate plans by June 2025. The Commission will help the member states through several guidance documents, including a document including good practices in addressing those categories, which perhaps you could also be an inspiration, and also we'll make sure in the assessment that the fund, there is a best use of those resources by the member states. I think this will give me a good transition to the, let's say, the local dimension, which has been a very
Elena,
yes,
I'm sorry.
I will conclude in one
thank you.
minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that's what I want to say. So I think we go to the slide 29. So just to conclude, both in the crisis and in general, in all the documents have been and initiatives have been presented, and in particular addressing the most vulnerable in our society, we saw and we made sure that there was a role for the let's say the local level. And why so? Because in just to mention, for instance, mayors, they normally know very well their territory, and they are able to have a good assessment of the conditions in their communities. What I think will be important for you to be aware of is that in many of these initiatives, we have increased the role of the local perspectives, including the Social Economic Fund, in terms of being consulted at the level of the strategy. So strategic planning. So the public consultation is not anymore just a way to consult, but it should be also seen as a way to contribute. The other issue that we see is also the capacity building for the transition. We often talk about building, for instance, a workforce that would help us to deliver on the Green Deal, but we shouldn't forget we need also the inside public institution in particular, and in particular the local level, to build the capacity to deliver on the task that will be usually implemented at their level in the different countries in Europe. So that it's very important to take into account, and in particular for problems which are very complex as addressing energy poverty. Finally, I think also trying to build synergies across all these different rule books that we have presented. Each of them has a certain purpose, but it's also important that in particular local authorities are supporting, trying to navigate through all these different opportunities and instruments, and also they understand which one is the right one for let's say for the problems they need to address. So just that to recognize through all our initiatives that we see a leading role for all regions and cities in Europe in any of the let's say initiatives that we are currently discussing at the current stage, from the Green Deal to addressing the crisis to the energy saving measures, and we saw there they played an important part in that respect. I think I will stop here, and then perhaps I'll take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Elena. Indeed, we know it's a highly ambitious assignment to try to sum up the very dense policy developments in a very short time. So I think your presentation was very clear in this respect, and I thank you for this. The participants will appreciate, and yes, there will be time for questions afterwards. We've seen that there's a very strong legislative package, and that the key pieces do really put a spotlight on the transformatory capacity of the public sector, leading by example. And here, local authorities, they would be invited to be ready to intercept and capture this support, and the LIFE program is available for that. And herewith, I would invite my colleagues, Dimitris and Christina and Nina, to outline the funding topics, which we will present to you in greater detail. Thank you very much. Dimitris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annette. So we start with a topic that supports local communities, and you can see the title that it's quite clear that this topic aims to support local communities, provide technical support for their clean energy transition plans and strategies, and includes, of course, municipalities and regions. We can go to the next slide. The context we have already more or less seen, and we all have acknowledged that cities and regions are decisive players in order to achieve the targets, the EU targets for 2030 and 2050, and also their national targets through the national plans, in order to achieve carbon neutrality. And in order to do that, they need to commit for ambitious and rapid clean energy transitions measures. And their role also is quite important in the current geopolitical context, because they can this way contribute to phase out the dependency of Europe to fossil fuel imports, which have seen how important it is, especially the last year. And the topic has as its main aim to provide technical support to authorities in order to improve their capacity to plan and implement local energy transition plans. And I will continue with the challenges that the cities usually face. And we know very well that especially the smaller municipalities, the ones that are isolated geographically, the rural areas and carbon intensive regions, for example, they lack this technical capacity within their administrations in order to develop and implement their energy and climate plans. And it's also a challenge to manage to align their existing plans and to update them with the new and more ambitious targets. And we see that targets are being revised through the time and quite often. So it's a need, it's a clear need that the local level needs to adjust its strategies with the ones that are being developed in the European and the national level. We have also observed that there is a lack of holistic planning within the administrations, the municipal and local administrations, and lack of sectoral integration. And this can be supported by organizational structures that this topic calls the local authorities to develop. And it's also a challenge to secure resources. We know that, and also the political commitment is challenging in that level because of the often electoral cycles that change and shifts the ambition and the commitment of the local level to deliver the plans, and this to be underpinned also by the local public and private stakeholders, and of course including citizens and communities. The next slide describes the two main two main scopes that our topic has. And I will start by saying that it's equally relevant to address either the one or both the scopes in your proposals. It's important to know that. The first one focuses on the capacity building activities for the development of clean energy transition plans and strategies. And the second one focuses on creation or reinforcement of organizational structures for the implementation and monitoring of integrated clean energy transition plan and strategies. In the next slide, I will dive in a little bit more in the first scope, which supports municipalities and local and regional level to deliver ambitious clean energy transition plans and strategies for 2030, and also paving the way for even longer term towards 2050. And this needs to be coherent with the European and national frameworks. This is quite important. The focus could be on on developing and reinforcing the technical, legal, and social skills among the local and regional authorities, but also put forward the right mix of activities, as for example, it can be training programs for policymakers or for public officer, replication and rollout of best practices, or information tools that support the implementation of integrated clean energy transition plans, either at local or at district level. The second scope in the next slide aims to facilitate the creation or reinforcement of the organizational structures, as we call them, for the implementation and monitoring of integrated clean energy transition plans and strategies. So we're also looking at the implementation, not only on the planning part. And we try to facilitate the creation of this type of structures, which could be multidisciplinary and cross-sectoral within the local and regional authorities, in order to strengthen the capacity and mandate of associate technical entities, as for example, local and regional energy agencies. So we call to have this cooperation among these structures. And also this specific scope focuses on having integrated planning processes that could include quite a few enabling elements, such as clear political commitment, identification of appropriate resources and financing opportunities, accurate and timely access to relevant data, uh, reinforcing the dialogue among different governance levels, but also to call for an active engagement of public and private stakeholders, including for citizens and for communities. And with this, then I will pass the floor to Christina, which will give you some examples of proposals from the past that we have funded through this topic. Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitris. Please, yeah, next slide. That's good. I'm Cristina Mestre, and I will continue with the presentation of this topic. Now that you've heard about the topic in the call 23, as Dimitris was just telling you, we want to show you some examples of past and running projects for potential applicants, so yourselves, to get an idea of the work that is actually being done under this topic. We have a long history of projects supporting this life of action in particular, as this topic was already existing and quite popular under our predecessor funding program, which is the H2020 energy efficiency, of which you have heard this morning as well. So we actually show this to encourage you, to encourage applicants to get inspiration, build upon these actions. As there is a lot of great work being done or that has been done, which can be further continued or scaled up. So all these projects you see, this is just a glimpse of projects that we have, we are currently running or have been running in the past. They all focus, of course, on supporting cities and regions in the energy transition. That's at the core of this topic, but they have different focus actually. And I'm gonna give you a few examples for you to understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, in the interest of time, I'll just name a few. For instance, we have projects which have developed capacity building activities for municipalities to develop SICAPs, such as empowering and right now running Own Your SICAP, for example, or to finance them or the activities under their SICAPs or clean energy transition plans and strategies, for example, Prospects and its second version, Prospect Plus, sorry. We have projects which have worked or are working on transition plans such as CIDRAC 50 or Decarb City Pipes. And we have an example, for instance, of a project focusing very much on the social aspects of the clean energy transition and carbon neutrality transition, which is focusing on the empowering leaders on this clean energy transition, so current and potential emerging leaders. So this is very much a summary, but the point of this is please have a look and get inspiration by these projects when you're thinking of your idea. Next slide, please. We have furthermore exciting upcoming projects that are coming up as the selected projects under the LIFE CET call in 2022, so the call that we had last year. I just want to give you, again, in the interest of time, a very short overview. For example, we will have a project that will support integrated energy and climate plans in small rural municipalities. It was mentioned by Dimitris a minute ago, the importance of this sector as well. We have, for example, projects focusing on the clean energy transition in Central and Eastern Europe, with a specific focus on the energy efficiency first principle. And well, you see in the slides a bit of an overview of what's coming up. We can't really say much more about these projects as they are still ongoing negotiations, but hopefully soon you can learn more about them. Next slide, please. Thank you. Concerning the impacts, we ask project applicants to specify what impacts is your work expected to achieve. This is very important, of course, and you have heard about this in the morning session. But just as a reminder here too, we expect projects to specify the impacts, specific topic impacts as per the call documents. I will tell you more about this in a minute. Projects may propose additional indicators, impact indicators, to measure specific progress and success of your specific action. As an example, for instance, if your project has a task dedicated to, say, involving young population, you may add an indicator on this. This is an additional indicator. And furthermore, as you heard this morning, projects also need to estimate their impact on the common indicators for the LIFE CET subprogram, which are horizontal across topics. We ask the applicants to estimate these impacts by the end of the project. This is just again a repetition of what you heard this morning. By the end of the project and also for 5 years after the project. And it is very important that these indicators are solid in the sense of having a good, credible calculations and underlying assumptions, and that the activities are fit for purpose in order to achieve set impacts. So there's a direct correlation between your activities and the impacts you want to achieve. Next slide, please. So I was mentioning just a minute ago about the specific impact indicators for the local topic. You are not expected to cover all of them. You are expected to cover the ones that are relevant for your action. So in this regard, these impact indicators that are specific for the local topic are the number of policies, plans, or strategies established through the action, the number of policymakers or public officers with improved capacity and skills, the number of institutionalized dialogues and cooperations within and beyond public authorities, including peers, private stakeholders, and civil society, the number of public and private stakeholders engaged, the secure political commitment and resources, as this was also mentioned by Dimitri specifically earlier, and the number of organizational structures created and reinforced. So again, as a repetition, you are not expected to address all of these, only the ones that are relevant for your specific action. Next slide, please. Some additional clarifications before I conclude, because yeah, repeating that's good. These are frequently asked questions that we get, and it's important that we mention them here again for clarification. So on the question, do local and regional authorities need to be beneficiaries of the consortium? So you don't have an obligation. It's not a requirement to have a public authority or public authorities as part of the consortium. However, this topic focuses very much on support to these type of authorities. So a strong involvement is recommended and strongly encouraged. This could be, for example, demonstrated with letters of support, which was mentioned this morning by my colleague. So do applicants need to address all the expected impacts listed? So this is easy. We just talked about this. You are not expected to cover all of them. You're expected to cover the ones that are relevant for you, for your action. Do applicants need to address all points under the scope section? No. So it is equally relevant for you to address either one or the two of them. This is also was also mentioned by Dimitris when he presented the scopes. The two options are valid and relevant. Finally, before I conclude with the local topic, I wanted to take a bit of a side note, as we also wanted to inform you about the EU City Facility. The EU City Facility is a flagship initiative funded by LIFE CET subprogram and run by a consortium of organizations which is led by Energy Cities. It provides technical support and financial support. So financial support is a lump sum of 60,000 euro to cities and their groupings in order to develop investment concepts to kickstart the implementation of their CCAPs or clean energy transition plans. So if you like, this would be the support for what comes after a plan has been developed and approved. They run a series of calls. The applicants can submit a request for support, and the call 5 is open until the 30th of June, so in a month's time or by the end of this month. And it's open to applicants from the EU 27 member states plus Iceland and Ukraine. So this is very much the LIFE signatory countries. And there are 2 more calls planned in 2023 and 2024. If this resonates with you, if this is interesting for you, please go to the website where you can find information about the application, the eligibility conditions, and yeah, all the information that you may need on practical details. With this, we are going to conclude the local topic. We wish you all the luck in your application, and I'm going to give the floor now to my colleague Nina Klemola, who will present to you the ENERPOV topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina, and good morning to everyone from my side as well. I will dive straight into this topic of alleviating household energy poverty and vulnerability in Europe. So as already mentioned in the earlier policy presentation, there's still a large percentage of the EU or a significant percentage of the EU 27 population that were unable to keep their homes adequately warm according to data from 2021. And this signals that energy poverty is still a continuing problem in Europe. So whilst the main causes of energy poverty involve the poor energy performance of buildings and also domestic appliances, low incomes and high energy expenditure, in particular in the recent years, it does remain a multifaceted issue, as has been mentioned, that involves many different sectors, including not only energy sectors, but housing, health and social sectors. And as also mentioned earlier, in particular, the European Green Deal looks at mitigating energy poverty and gives it an increased importance as part of a socially just energy transition. So different key pieces of EU energy legislation are being updated as part of the Fit for 55 package, including for the purposes of this topic, the Energy Efficiency Directive. And this proposed recast text, as already mentioned, sets out to implement energy efficiency measures as a priority among energy poor and vulnerable households. With this in mind, the overall aim of this topic is to improve the living conditions and lower the energy expenditure for vulnerable households through the energy efficiency measures and increased use of renewable energy. So concretely, this translates into building the skills and capacity of affected households on the one hand, and on the other hand, also providing support and capacity building to public authorities and other relevant actors as well. So in terms of then the scope, the topic consists of 4 different aspects. The proposals are free to address one or more of these. They all have equal value, and I will present them one by one. So next slide, please. The first aspect is to looking at supporting renovation of private multi-apartment buildings. So the proposed energy efficiency directive recast acknowledges the need to address the split incentive dilemma and to remove barriers to energy efficiency measures in multi-owner properties specifically. So in this aspect, the aim is therefore to support the renovation of these types of private buildings with vulnerable residents, of course, and doing so by adapting and reinforcing the governance and decision-making structures of the building management, of the homeowner associations or the tenants associations as relevant. We would also expect these projects and proposals to tackle the related regulatory framework barriers, looking at, for instance, rental laws or property laws that may be impediments to renovations in these types of buildings, look at split incentives where these are relevant, and also set up and coordinate the relevant support services, for instance, for households in relation to the renovation process and so forth. The renovation actions supported should really also take into account and bear in mind the ability of the residents to remain in their homes to avoid any displacement or gentrification effects after the renovation works. And this is also particularly for the case of rental properties. Next slide, please. So then the second scope is to design and pilot sustainable large-scale programs to improve the skills and capacity of energy vulnerable households. And this is really with a view to not only improve their energy efficiency and increase the uptake of renewable energy solutions, but ultimately to improve their comfort in their homes and lower energy expenditure in the households. So these programs should be tailored for vulnerable households. It's very important to underline the tailoring. And this may take the form of providing feedback, indirect or direct feedback via energy bills or energy applications, energy metering, for instance, but could also take the form of energy efficiency measures at a smaller scale, such as draught proofing or radiator reflector panels and so forth. So this is not aimed to be a renovation subtopic here. They could also take the form of financial support schemes or different types of collective solutions. So could be group purchases, collective self-consumption and energy sharing schemes. Of course, this depends a little bit on the regulatory framework in application in the member states. So these are the types of issues that could be tackled in the programs to build the skills and capacity of the households. But I really want to emphasize that these are programs that which would need to be sustainable, meaning longer term, larger scale, and tailored for the households. And as such, these actions would need to be embedded in the structural frameworks and activities with the relevant public authorities or the social intermediaries and other relevant actors in this field. So we're not looking for one-off short-term campaigns to inform consumers only, and that would finish at the end of the project. But we are looking for something, and this is a key element also of the proposed activities, would be the development of a strategy to ensure that the programs will be sustained after the end of the project, including looking at the available sources of funding for such programs in the longer term. Next slide, please. So this third aspect then, third possibility, is aimed more at the public authorities and the intermediaries rather than the households directly themselves. So the aim is to deliver capacity building for the regional or local authorities, so looking at the subnational level, as well as societal intermediaries, and really support these actors in setting up coordination and cooperation structures to address energy poverty in a cross-sectoral manner. So in other words, this aspect looks specifically to overcome the issue of the more fragmented responses that we often have and see still to energy poverty by individual sectors and also sometimes across different departments even. So the aim is to offer this capacity building to all the relevant sectors, be it housing or energy, health, social sectors, and facilitate the setup of these coordination structures. Ultimately, this capacity building should lead to these actors then co-designing and rolling out integrated interventions and schemes for the benefit of the vulnerable households. However, this end result is not aimed at as being part of the proposed action that we're looking for. So action itself should be on the capacity building and setting up the coordination structures. And here, of course, we would expect all the relevant sectors to be involved, depending, of course, on the country, on the region, which ones are specifically relevant. Next slide, please. Then the final aspect under this topic, the fourth aspect, is to support obligated parties under the energy efficiency obligation schemes of the Energy Efficiency Directive. So obligated parties have potentially at their disposal the necessary data and the means to identify energy vulnerability among their customers. And as mentioned in the policy presentation, the proposed recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive mentions that vulnerable households should be prioritized in the implementation of the energy saving obligations, with the option also of requiring obligated parties to work together with the local authorities to do so. So here the aim is really to support the obligated parties, meaning the energy utilities, energy companies, suppliers and retailers in doing this obligation, in carrying out this obligation by setting up and testing schemes for energy efficiency improvement measures for the benefit of the vulnerable households. And again, where applicable, to work with the local authorities or municipalities or even the networks, similar networks such as the Covenant of Mayors, where this might be relevant. So in these types of projects, what we're looking for is that the obligated parties in particular would be either directly involved, or at least their support would be very clearly demonstrated in the proposal. And what I would like to underline here, of course, is if you are thinking of submitting a proposal on this particular aspect, we really invite you to have a close look at the recast EED text once it's formally adopted, hopefully this summer, so that you have a look at what the update is and how this would fit with your planning. So moving on then, next slide, please, to the common parts of the scope. So regardless of the aspect or aspects that you might be addressing in your proposal, all the actions are expected to really build on the tools and the indicators and resources from the existing initiatives. And in particular here, I want to mention the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub and the Energy Poverty Observatory as a predecessor to Advisory Hub, as well as the Covenant of Mayors initiative as well. The proposed actions should also take into account multiple benefits from energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. So here, the choice, of course, of which multiple benefits you would be looking at and which ones are relevant depends very much on the activities you're proposing. So we're not being prescriptive here, but this is something we would expect you to look at as an important part of energy poverty alleviation. And a third component is that the proposed actions should involve the local and or regional authorities and intermediaries in the actions as indicated under the different aspects that I've just mentioned. So in terms of intermediaries, these could be consumer organizations, could be energy companies, healthcare providers, homeowners associations, or even renewable energy communities, if these are relevant for what you're putting forward. So this is up to you to look at which actors are the most relevant in the given context that you're proposing. And also, I want to mention that regardless of the aspects that you are addressing, the actions also may, so this is not compulsory, but you may also want to put specific focus on a particular group of energy poor households, which are more at risk of being affected by energy poverty or more susceptible to the adverse impacts of energy poverty. And here you can also, of course, take into account gender considerations where these are relevant. And a second component would be to take into account the pre-bound and rebound effects if you consider these relevant in the context of what you are proposing. So then I will move on to impacts. As already explained by Christina in the previous presentation, we have 3 different types of impacts and indicators this year, so I will not repeat what was already presented, and I will just focus on the topic specific impacts and indicators now in my next slide. So because we have 4 quite different aspects in this topic, also the topic-specific impacts and indicators are varied, and the proposals are not expected to address all of the listed impacts and indicators, but really to choose the ones that are most relevant for what you're putting forward. As mentioned, what's very important is that you really give the analysis of the starting point and your assumptions for your impacts, and you establish clearly the causality between the activity you're putting forward and the results and impacts that you expect. In this topic, what I really want to highlight here is that you should demonstrate how the action will reduce energy poverty and energy vulnerability for the targeted vulnerable households specifically. So this is really the end result that we're looking for, and also how these would be developed into successful approaches that can be replicated in other regions or member states after the project. So as I will not go through all of these, but indeed there's a selection that you can have a look at from the number of the energy vulnerable households with reduced energy costs or that are benefiting from the measures, to the number of the multi-apartment buildings that are renovated, and then the different coordination structures and governance structures that have been established or adapted, in addition to some other impacts as well. What I would like to mention then On the common indicators in the next slide, is that we know that demonstrating energy savings in this target group can be difficult. So for the point on primary energy savings triggered by the project, it's true that many low-income households already consume less energy than average households, and therefore it's understandable that in this topic, energy savings may remain on the lower end, depending, of course, on the action and the activities that are being implemented. So the focus here is not so much on the absolute energy savings, but the increased energy efficiency to achieve a minimum comfort level for those households. So I would like you to also bear that in mind when preparing and calculating the expected impacts for this topic. Next slide, please. Just a few very short key reminders. So as mentioned already many times, we're really focusing here on the energy vulnerable households. So we're not looking at companies, for instance, and we would expect you to take into account the specific needs of these households in the proposals and demonstrate not only that you have an understanding of the needs of these households, but also how you are building on the previous and existing initiatives and other projects. There are quite a few already around from the last years, and it's important not to duplicate work done by other projects or, for instance, by the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub. We, as I've mentioned already, also would expect really to ensure the involvement of all the relevant actors. This is one of the key components, is to bring the cross-sectoral aspects to these projects and to bring the relevant actors together in the activities. And as already mentioned earlier, all the aspects in this topic have equal value. So this is something that should also be kept in mind, that one is not more significant than the other. And then finally, coming to the end here, there's a last slide. I just want to mention or show the different past and ongoing projects that we already have in this field on energy poverty. So there are many projects that have been implemented and can serve as an inspiration for you, as I mentioned. Here, perhaps I can bring up two projects specifically. One is COMACT, which is looking at energy efficiency improvements in multifamily apartment buildings, and as such is of direct relevance to one of the aspects this year. And the other one is Social Watt, which looked at enabling obligated parties to develop, adopt, and test innovative energy poverty schemes across Europe. And this, of course, would have relevance for the aspect on supporting obligated parties under the Energy Efficiency Directive. So I really invite you to have a look at all these in preparing your proposals, and we look forward to seeing and reading your proposals in due course. I think I will finish with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, for this very interesting, inspiring outline of this funding topic. And also thanks to my colleagues, Christina and Dimitris, who explained you the local topic. So before we go to the Slido view, which we just saw for an instance, so we are very happy that you are active on Slido. We give first the floor to our project experience. Marika is joining us from Latvia, and has been really performing leading work on the energy management systems and the contribution to CCAPs. Today, however, what she brings to us is actually her experience firsthand as a project coordinator, assembling and conceiving basically local and regional needs, ambitions and ideas into an EU project, and how basically all of that was inspired, conceived and packaged. And we are very happy that you're sharing your experience with us today. Marika, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Annette, for kind introduction. And I will, I thank you for inviting me to share this experience. And could we go to the presentation? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so for the last 20 years, I'm working in Ecodom. We are a consulting company situated in Latvia. And for these years, for these 20-25 years, we have been really involved in in European projects as partners. And these were programs like Intelligent Energy Europe, and lately was Horizon 2020, and now LIFE programs. And in 2017, we had the first happy experience we gained. So we became a coordinator of Compete for SECAP, a project really focusing on municipalities, how to increase the capacity. And in 2022, we started as well, again, as a coordinator, a follow-up project on your SECAP. And I will try to explain our experience throughout these last 5 years. How did we develop the project? Why did we get the financing, and the main points from our perspective? Next slide, please. So very shortly, the idea of the Own Your SECAP, which we started just last year. So the idea is very simple. We would like to encourage and assist the municipalities to deliver a systematic approach in the implementation of SECAP measures. So we would like that they not only develop SECAPs, but they also, of course, implement them. And we use 3 main tools what we think would be working the best, which is one is energy management system according to the ISO 50001 standard, then is on the climate adaptation, and we try to use the design thinking as an engagement approach. So it's very specific how to involve the municipalities and municipal employees in the discussions of the SECAP measures and implementation of them. But I will not focus on the project. There's a web page we have, and we are working in 11 countries. So we will be very happy if you have a look at this and maybe find something interesting for you. But next slide, please. But I would like to focus is more on the way how did we develop these projects and how did we start. So I think the main important aspect of a successful project proposal, I think, is the idea. So if you really feel that the idea you want to get the financing for is brilliant and it actually works, and you actually really feel that you burn for it. So I think it would be, it's a green light. You should go on and develop it. And before that, of course, then you should just ask yourself, and maybe even some of your colleagues and partners in other countries, just to ask, does this idea actually would work also in European countries, not only in your country, but abroad in the wider range? I think the other aspect which is very important is when you write the proposal about the concreteness. So as concrete as possible and as systematic as possible in the proposal is a key issue when the evaluators are reading your proposal, that they are actually understanding what you would like to achieve, so that you just don't state we want to increase capacity of local authorities, but actually how you are going to do it, what instruments and methods are you going to use. And as already previous speakers were speaking about the calls, there are really a lot of projects done in these last 20 years in for example, in the capacity building call. So there is already a lot of knowledge, and I think it's good that when you write the proposal, you have a look at these ideas, and they are well structured. And of course, it is important that you actually follow the call topic. So this is something that also as an evaluator, I've noticed that sometimes the applicants are not following really what is asked. So, and this is usually very sad point, that the proposal is very good, but it hasn't been submitted to the right call. So this is something I would really advise to have a very close look what is really required. Next slide, please. Another important aspect is the consortium. maybe not really in the phase when you write the proposal, but this is most important when you're already implementing the proposals. So it is important when you write to ask yourself, with whom do you want to actually work, with which countries you would like to work, and it would be good that you really have an investigation of the potential partners, that you find really the partners who can deliver, so that the idea they are keen to do this, they actually believe the idea you are bringing forward, and that they are going to be motivated to do this together with you during the grant agreement period when you have the project ongoing. So reliable, competent, and experienced and recognized. So this is also very important that the partners you are inviting, they are not first-time beginners. So otherwise, then you would need to have a lot of time also once you get the proposal approved to invest in their knowledge increase in order to achieve broader objectives of your project. And of course, this is totally based on our experience, the partners with whom you actually feel good to have the time to have meetings, and they're happy to meet the people. So this is really an added value. Next slide, please. The writing process, I've been working on these projects for more than 20 years, and I've seen a lot of approaches how the proposals are written. So in general, there are two main approaches, and this is up to you which one you feel more comfortable. So one approach is the coordinator writes himself or herself, or the team who is coordinating writes the proposal and then shares with the consortium for the input. Or the other approach is what sometimes also coordinator is using, so that he or she shares the task to write the work plan, for example, who is responsible. The work package leaders are writing their work package tasks. And if I see from my perspective, I prefer, and also in how we wrote both of the winning proposals, is that we as the coordinators wrote the proposals and we shared with the partners, so for their input and for their suggestions how to do it. This removes really a problem which often rises if the proposal is written by different parts and parties, the language and the synergies. Because if one person or one institution is writing, then you really have an overview and you can find the synergies and better interlink all the parts of the proposal. Next slide, please. And here are the main steps, step by step. So based on the proposals on the different four main sections of the proposal, so the relevance, impact, implementation, and resources. And for each of these parts, I try to really identify the main points which would be best and which where we paid really a lot of attention. Is that under the relevance, of course, the main part is, of course, to have a look at the previous proposals and the feedback which we received from the evaluators, because this is often a good point where the evaluators really pinpointing the weaker parts, which in the proposal, of course, in your proposal, you can improve. The impact part is very important part because this is the point where you promise and where the evaluators can assess your ambitions. So in here, what we wrote, and also in our proposals, where partners sometimes said, of course, we have been very, very ambitious, but in the meantime, we have been trying to be really realistic, yes, very ambitious, but also realistic and credible. And I think it is also in the proposal very important really to provide a substantiated assumptions. How did you actually got to these numbers, so that the evaluator can have a look. And in resources are very much interrelated to the implementation part, and here the important are the responsibilities and roles assigned well between the partners. Are they even in the consortium that there are no partners getting the 30% of the budget, and that this is well distributed, and that actually that the work packages budgets are really well assigned according to the tasks you are implementing. And next slide, please. And yes, the time I think is very crucial. There's at the final stage, you will always feel that maybe if you had started earlier, that the better results would have been achieved. So yes, there's still a lot of time until the submission date of the both calls. So I would really advise to plan it. There's summer holidays in between, but even if you plan, then sometimes the feeling has been always that we should have been planning it even twice more, longer time for the writing part and also for commenting part. And last slide, please. And here, yes, so here are some main points which we have used throughout these years. So one is there is a beautiful guide how to write clearly. Of course, now artificial intelligence helps us write even better, but this is a good guide to have a clear way how to present your proposals, especially if we are not native English speaking organizations. And I think, what I already mentioned, follow the template, formulate the idea, team up with a colleague. So one person is very difficult for one person to write. A team for the proposals as for these calls is necessary. And what the last but not least point, what we've used also, that creating the infographics and using them in the proposal, I think really helps actually for the evaluators to understand your idea and be better evaluated. And this is very shortly it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marika. I think it was very precious that you shared kindly your experiences as a coordinator of fairly dense consortia that you've done in the past, and ambitious work. And I think also the enthusiasm came through. So not only solid knowledge, but also enthusiasm is a good ingredient for a successful proposal. Maybe to add, also making back the loop to the plenary session this morning, I think we are all aware that this is a competitive process. Having said this, as the Clean Energy Transition Program has fairly focused, dedicated topics for funding, it also really relates to a group of stakeholders, municipalities, cities, all of the constituencies, which are really active in specific fields. And so if you want, I think the message that we would like to pass is that actually a participation is perfectly doable, and that in terms of the success rates, if you wish, they're fairly attainable. So in this sense, obviously, it's always a very careful judgment whether to invest the time into a complex and time-consuming preparation of a European collaborative project. Having said this, the benefits, I think, would come out fairly clearly. And in terms of the process, all of the information is clearly available. Notably, how Marika explained to us, putting herself in the mind of an evaluator looking at your proposal, and that certainly helps if you do that exercise to really increase your chances and actually join us in this community if that is inspiring to you. Now, saying you, I think we can open our session for a range of questions. We could hopefully see our Slido window, which would help us quickly having a glance of what is on your mind. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, notably to Michele Sansoni, who's our team member working in that field and who's kindly moderating our Slido session for us. So let's take the first question. They are actually ranged by popularity. So basically, if somebody posts a question and that you have a same interest, then you can actually vote for the question and make sure that it comes up on the attention. Here, the question is, are these calls open to all European cities or to the ones selected in the city's mission for climate neutral and smart cities by 2030? So now, while we are working very much hand in hand with our colleagues looking at the agenda of smart cities and the city mission, the answer is probably fairly clear. Christina.
Yes, the answer is no. It's not a requirement for cities to be part of the selected cities under the city's mission. So, voilà, no. That's a very short answer, but I hope it's clear.
Yes, thank you very much. While, of course, many cities probably are partnering up also in adjacent projects, also in under LIFE Clean Energy Transition, having a very fairly great traction momentum of their mission commitment. Having said this, there's no formal requirement in this case. We are very open and agile to create synergies with other strands of policy initiatives at EU level. If we turn to the next question, which says, what do you mean in the local topic with the terms used organizational structures to support and coordinate the implementation and monitoring of integrated clean energy transition plans? Maybe Dimitris would like to take this.
Yes, thanks a lot. It's true, it's a dense sentence, but we want to clarify that we mean, for instance, the creation of cross-sectoral, multidisciplinary teams or departments within the public authorities, which can support the clean energy transition plans and their implementation, or it could also be technical bodies such as energy agencies. So this type of organizational structure is what we mean with this sentence. I hope it was clear.
Very good. Thank you, Dimitris. Let's take one or two questions on the side of our poverty topic. Nina, if you're available. Here, some of the fact findings that we shared, the minimum maximum duration. And I think there was also a question on the minimum and maximum budget. Maybe we could just place that as well.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the duration for the ENERPOV projects, there's no specified duration. Normally, of course, these types of projects are about 3 years, but this is purely indicative. So it's up to you to look at what it is you're proposing and to set the appropriate time frame for that. I think, so that was for the duration. I think there was also a question on the budget, maximum grant amount, indeed. So for the energy poverty topic, there's an indicative budget that is mentioned as between 1.5 and 2 million euros for this topic. However, this is indicative, so the proposals you can put forward amounts higher or lower than that if you consider that that is necessary for your proposal.
Thank you, Nina. Maybe we could just add that in terms of the budget frame, here the text specifies that proposals are invited for a frame of about 1.75 million euro. Again, as Nina was correctly saying, this is an indication which helps you to appreciate the scale and the size of resources that you might want to consider in such a collaborative project, because here we are on the topic which requires collaboration across the borders, but also here it's not a strict rule in or rule out criterion, but really to be understood as a very good compass for yourself. We could probably take the next question on the policy link, and maybe I can just already introduce the question by confirming that indeed putting out a funding topics which is closely aligned to energy policy objectives, which are derived from our legislative pieces and which are under significant recast this year, and giving a much stronger yet framework for all of this type of activity, but which is basically work in progress and evolving. How do we actually design the topics so that they're actually adaptive within this negotiation process, which is not all concluded for all of these pieces. And basically, in principle, all of the topics are designed in a way that they're adaptive, agile, to really be also future-proofed and to take account of the best prospects under the current negotiation of the recasts, but which are actually open to evolve also in case there are, of course, still bits and ends which are under negotiation and which are just not yet concluded and which might be concluded in a different way between the parties. And in this case, Elena, on this question, is there anything specific that you would like to add on this point?
Yes, so I would just clarify the timeline. So here we refer to the Buildings Directive, and I want to mention that the positions of the co-legislators, so the European Parliament and the Council, are known, are published, and also you have the position of the Commission. So, and we are about to start the interinstitutional negotiations next week, with the aim to conclude those negotiations by the end of the year. So you see already the main objectives, and I think in terms of and starting point, so this is already known to you to take into account. At the same time, I also want to clarify that, as I said before, we have concluded the negotiations on the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is also relevant for both topics and themes. And we are expecting also the text to be published, I think, over summer in the official journal. You have already in the official journal the regulation establishing a social climate fund, again, their role for local level, and this is the fund addressing the vulnerable households, including energy poor. We have also, we're about to conclude our technical meetings ongoing, the negotiations on the Renewable Directive. And overall, you have all the, let's say, the framework of the REPowerEU action plan to take into account. There are several initiatives that will also follow, including also assessment by the Commission of the emergency measures that have been taken during the crisis. This is also a perspective that perhaps you want to take into account. With senior colleagues, we are available always to offer more clarity in the months to come about these ongoing developments.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Indeed, a complex context, but becoming much clearer when you outline the timeline and the prospects of the next steps. So in the interest of time, I suggest that we take one more question for each of the funding areas, and that we would conclude then afterwards with the latest question on the city facility to clarify here the links. So on local, the next question would be whether proposals can address activities which also involve national authorities, so basically go across levels of governance. Christina, Dimitris, who would like to take that?
I can take it, and then
Great.
maybe Dimitris, if you want to complement. So this topic, as we explained, clearly focuses on the sort of governance levels that are below the national, so indeed local and regional. So in principle, the activities should involve indeed this level of governance. This is, I mean, however, activities can actually foresee a collaboration with the national level, particularly in the context of, well, fostering conversations and fostering dialogue with these different levels of governance in the context of the multi-level governance. But indeed, the activities should focus on local and regional authorities. I don't know, Dimitris, if you would like to add anything.
No, I think it was rather clear. So we do not, of course, exclude national authorities. They're a very crucial player, but this topic focuses on the local and regional level, as very correctly said by Christina, and we welcome, of course, synergies in that, as was said, in the multi-level governance dialogue that can be established.
Thank you very much, Christina and Dimitris. Then we'll take the next voted question on ENERPOV topic under the aspect of the ENERPOV scopes, I guess, to pilot a large-scale program to improve skills of households. Should these be at national or at the regional level? Nina, you can help clarifying this.
Yes, thank you. So the expectation is that the focus would be on the subnational levels, meaning regional and local levels. However, if you do put forward a proposal looking at a national level program, then you would need to clearly set out the reasons why you think this level program would be more effective, would be more efficient in improving the household skill and reaching these households. This may well be the case, but we would expect this to be put forward and demonstrated in the proposal.
Thank you very much, Nina. And then I suggest that I just pick up the line on the EU City Facility. To conclude this session, can cities get support for preparing LIFE CET proposals from the EU City Facility? Here, the EU City Facility is a really exciting instrument because it allows municipalities to have fast-tracked, fairly tailor-made, direct lump sum payment funding in order to prepare investment into sustainable energy in their constituency. So basically, all of the preparation work, the short preparation work to actually get a first orientation and mapping of the investment needs and how such an investment pipeline could be structured, what it is that it would need in terms of technical, financial, and legal resources in order to structure a larger project and bundle, and also the resources in case to actually reach out to other constituencies in the neighborhood to actually bundle into a greater pipeline. Now, in this sense, the EU City Facility support and our funding topics do not exclude each other at all. Some of the successful cities stemming out of the EU City Facility who had done then their first steps to structure their investment pipelines, they, for example, did apply to our project development assistance, which is not part of this session, but which is actually part of the next session after the lunch break, the so-called project development assistance, in which there is a fully fledged proposal possible to actually then really over time and over the time span which is needed, 2, 3, 4 years, in order to really implement this investment pipeline really up to the concrete launch of the investment. And some of the cities and municipalities, they use very usefully and very smartly the EU City Facility as an entry into either getting further support from the project development assistance or excuse me, to implement a relevant one-stop shop support, or for example, to move over to a larger investment, and where they, for example, would find open doors with a sister facility of the EIB, the European Investment Bank, which is managing the ELENA technical facility. So here you see it's really plugged in one-to-one. It's more rare that actually a EU facility proposal or successful project would actually get into this local work, because really the facility is about shaping an investment pipeline. And therefore there are other strands of support which are available and which will be explained in the afternoon session today. So I think here we need, in the interest of time, despite further interest, we fully understand that there are questions still, but please note that our team, of course, is absolutely glad to be available for your questions regarding the clarification of our funding topics, but also of some of the mechanics that our grant agreements which we are concluding. And you could always reach us under our email address, which is cinealifecet@eceuropa.eu, and which is available, where basically our whole energy team is behind that mailbox and is available for you. Your first point of contact, however, of course, might also be your national contact point in your country, the so-called LIFE NCPs. We have specific clean energy transition LIFE NCPs in each of the member states or each of the countries which is participating. They're very experienced, highly trained and highly knowledgeable colleagues in the national administrations who could help you appreciating your project idea. They can even go a step beyond our own service, because we can explain the technical functionality of our topics if you wish, whereas your national contact point, they, based on their experience, they can also encourage you or advise you regarding how to shape your project or your proposal idea in the most successful fashion, something which we as a grant authority, of course, cannot quite do, but of course your NCP can do this perfectly for you. I'm just seeing whether there's any other housekeeping that I should share with you. I'm invited to recall to you that the recordings will be available on the CINEA website very soon. And in case you were interested to actually engage into a more active partner search with our instruments, of course, there are many ways of how to search partners, but you could also meet bilaterally with other organizations who've signed up in the same way through the same B2Match platform from tomorrow onwards. In the meantime, I think this is a time for a last word from our side. I think we've seen a lot of high ambitions in this session. We've seen a very strong policy framework, but also very pressing needs, which I think you certainly will be the first ones to feel in your constituency, and which are really calling for a fast pace at all levels. And having said this, we also know that any transformatory vision is of no use without the implementation, and the implementation to be successful, that needs you at the local level. It needs to be a just transition as well. And in this light, we really do hope that you did find interest, that you did find common points, and maybe also inspiration today by the funding opportunities that the colleagues presented. And therefore, please don't hesitate to consider applying with your exciting project, with your forward-looking project. And we wish you all the best luck for your proposal preparation in case you're deciding to do so. And please do not hesitate to use all of the resources, the advice and the guidance, but also personal advice from NCPs and colleagues in order to make your proposal work. With this, I would like to thank again very warmly my colleagues, our speakers, our guests, Elena, Dimitris, Christina, Nina, Marika, and Michele for their commitment to offer you an interesting session. And we would like to thank you, participants, for joining us, and also apologies for the small delay. We hope that we didn't break too much into your lunch break, but there is still a bit of a break. In case you're joining our afternoon session, you're very welcome to do so. And in the meantime, this is all from our side, and we thank you and goodbye.